Good afternoon, everyone. Let me welcome you to the Burke County Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting for November the 5th, 2019. Madam Clerk, I'd like to announce that commissioners are here except for Commissioner Abley, who is asked to be excused for today. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll take a look at your telephones and other devices, please silence those for me, and I would appreciate it. And as you come up to speak today, if you'll activate the microphone on the end until the red light comes on when you do speak. Also, I want to say that Margaret Pierce is back with us today. Margaret has been out. I think everybody's well aware that husband Will has had a lot of, here's what I'm going to do, Margaret. Give us an update. Since none of us have seen you for a while and you've been spending a lot of time in Asheville, if you don't mind, if you do, okay.
Will became ill unexpectedly August 31st, and since then has had 17 surgeries trying to repair a perforated ulcer. Unfortunately, they're not able to repair it, so we are working with a wonderful team of surgeons and different doctors trying to determine ways to give him a chance to survive. Right now, we did a skin graft that we found out Friday was 50% successful, which is awesome, and they say that means that they probably will be able to save his life, so we're excited about that. Today is his birthday, and we are very pleased. It was a goal of his to get to his birthday, and he did. So
Great.
we are excited, and I appreciate everyone's patience and understanding as we've gone through this, and we have approximately a year ahead of us for other surgeries and being in the hospital. He probably won't come home for a year. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, 17 surgeries is just remarkable in itself to have to go through, and Margaret and I think your daughters have both resigned their jobs and are now staying at the hospital with Will. So yeah,
all three of our daughters are there for the most part. Two have had to, our daughter from Australia gave up her job and came home. She's been there for 5 years. Our oldest daughter, her company has told her when she can, they have to hire somebody, but when she can, she'll have a job. And our middle daughter works for the university and is still doing her best to work a little bit. But yes, we all rotate and want to be with him because it's been so critical. We've not felt very comfortable leaving him for long. So
I understand. Well, our prayers are with you, ladies and gentlemen. If you all would remember Will Pierce in your prayers also, we would certainly appreciate that.
thank you.
All right. Thank you, Margaret. Gentlemen, we'll move to the agenda. There is one addition to the agenda that we forgot to put on there, and that is Pet of the Month. I don't know how we forgot that, but we did. That will be a standing one for Pet of the Month, so if you will add that, and that is the only change to the agenda. So at this time, I will entertain a motion to accept the approval of the agenda with this addition. All right, gentlemen, you've heard that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Madam Clerk, that is everyone. Well, moving into our presentations for the day, the first presentation we have is from the Sheriff of Burke County. It's the recognition of Captain Greg Huntley for being named the North Carolina Jail Administrator of the Year, and that's going to be presented by the County Manager.
Okay. The sheriff had sent me an email back and said that he was leaving Asheville. I thought maybe he would be here. Apparently he's not. This is more ceremonial than anything else, as well as the other items under the sheriff for the recognition of deputies attaining their advanced law enforcement certificate. So I don't want to take up a lot of time with this during pre-agenda. Again, it's more ceremonial and an acknowledgement of a professional accomplishment, and we're certainly proud of all of these fine folks for what they're doing in their career field.
All right, thank you, Mr. County Manager. So under item number 2 and item number 3, which is recognition of Lieutenant Dawn Barber and recognition of Detective Christy Puckett for their advanced law enforcement certifications, if it's okay with the board, item number 1 and number 2 and number 3 without objection will remain on for presentations. Hearing no objections, item 1, 2, and 3, Madam Clerk, will remain on the items for presentation. Moving on to item number 4 will be the Burke County Public Schools presentation of the financial data for the period ending September the 30th of 2019. That will be presented by Keith Lawson, Burke County Public Schools Finance Officer. Keith?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Appreciate the opportunity to present our first quarter financial results for Burke County Public Schools. Although there's not a whole lot to share, given the fact that it's November the 5th and we still have no state budget. As you will notice in the quarterly schedule that you have in your board packets on page 1, we have our annual budget of the previous year of $109.8 million and our current forecasted budget of $110.3 million. That's about $440,000 difference at this point in time, year to year, which is minuscule when you're talking $100+ million budget. It's like 0.00%. The primary reason, of course, is that very first line, state. As you'll see, at this point, it's flat, and our directive to this point in time, given the fact that there is no state budget, is to operate at the previous year's level. There's one primary issue from a budget management standpoint, as far as I'm concerned, with operating at those levels, and that's as we progress deeper into the fiscal year, that becomes more and more difficult, because although we are currently being funded at the same level as the previous year, we have had to increase our employer matching retirement rate, as well as adopt a new health insurance contribution rates. So that is a substantial impact to the state budget. Obviously, earlier in the year, that's easier to manage, given $80 million for the year. But as you get deeper into the year, that becomes more and more difficult to pull off, making a greater contribution in other areas when you're supposed to be operating at the same level as the previous year. That being said, all budget line items are relatively flat year to year, with the exception of local. And again, we do appreciate very much the county's consideration of this year's budget and your increase in funding. You all agreed to assume funding one additional nursing position, which we were previously funding from our fund balance, and in addition to one new position to bring our student to nurse ratio more in line with the state recommendation. That equated to $174,750, so that is our increase in local funding. Going to the second page, again, year to year, as just stated, but in a little greater detail, our spending is relatively flat, even at the local level, with the exception of school nurses. And of course, you can see the different categories, and I'll just leave it at that, and would certainly be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Keith. Gentlemen, you've heard Keith's presentation. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, don't really have a question. It's a semi-question, a good financial report. But I saw on your report about you don't have a budget yet from the state.
That's correct, yes, sir.
You know, and if I ask the question to say, how long can you continue before they do a budget? And the end of that question would be anything we can do on our behalf as a board that might encourage y'all getting a budget.
Well, we certainly would appreciate any efforts on our behalf and any influence that you all have with our state legislators. And you all know, I'm sure, the bills that passed this last week and the contingencies in place for certified or classified staff's raises based on the Senate override of the veto, et cetera, et cetera. I won't get into all that. So if you have any influence in all that gobbledygook, we would very much appreciate it, because as I stated, the further into the year we get, the more difficult it is to operate at last year's level.
It's a little frustration to us, and especially when we talk to our congressmen and senators and House representatives, that, you know, they can't get that together when we have to do it, so they should be able to do it. But what I had in mind, and I'm going to leave it up to the chairman, if we could get a nucleus of county commissioners boards to do a somewhat resolution that our local schools are getting to the point they're hurting. Why don't you pass the budget one way or the other? It is time, it is way past time, and it'd be a nice Thanksgiving present.
Yes, sir, it would.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Any other questions or comments?
No questions for me. Keith, great report as usual. I appreciate the information that you submit on a quarterly basis. Mr. Chairman, at this point, I would say, make the motion that we would move this from a presentation format at the regular meeting to the consent agenda if we don't have any other questions. Keith, probably wouldn't mind not having to come to the regular meeting now if I had to hazard a guess, because you're here answering all the questions we have and we've got all the information, so I'd make that motion.
You can't do a motion on present.
Mr. Vice Chair has made a suggestion that we move this over to the consent agenda, which I would certainly agree with myself, so that you wouldn't have to come back to the regular meeting. Any other comments
Suggestion.
on that?
I agree with it.
Mr. Taylor? We got three of us agree with it.
You're just not supposed to make motions.
It's not a motion.
I'll make it not a motion, it's a suggestion.
It's somewhat illegal, I have no problems with it.
It's not illegal. We can move it over to the consent agenda
Uh,
if you agree to.
But I would say to you that for years here before, we did not have monthly visitors and reports from the school, and it is it's the biggest single budget item that we have, and it's important that we communicate, stay informed, and support each other. So for that reason, I wouldn't just change it, but it would keep you from coming to the regular meeting. Thank you.
So you are suggesting to me to leave it where it is or move it to consent?
I don't mind on this issue.
Okay, Madam Clerk, let's move that over to the consent agenda. We will continue having your reports here,
Yes.
but that means you would not have to come to the regular meeting and make the report a second time, okay? Because we can accept that here, all right?
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you, sir.
much.
All right, sir. All right, moving on to item number 5 from the Meeting Place Mission is a resolution proclaiming November 16 through 24 as National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, and that will be presented by Allison Asbell from the Meeting Place Mission Executive Director. Hey, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for having me. So thank you for first looking at this proclamation. The reason that we have brought this to you all is because it's a national movement. The National Coalition Against Homelessness actually started this proclamation years ago, and so they always ask agencies like the Meeting Place who support the homeless to get our local representatives on board with it. A little bit about the Meeting Place. We help those who are homeless and those at imminent risk of homelessness by getting them back into housing. Last year, in the first quarter of 2019, we helped move over 40 individuals into housing. We helped with over 20 job placements. We had over 7,514 night stays across our programs, and we also served over 17,000 meals and did over 20,000 loads of laundry. The biggest thing about this proclamation is that it is helping spread awareness about who we are, what we do, and the population that we serve. And one thing that I've learned is that information and knowledge is power, and it helps us to teach everyone in our community a little bit about the underserved population and how we can help and how our community can help. A quick story I just want to share about someone that we've been able to help recently. Very rarely do we get single dads come to us and ask for help, and recently we were able to help a single dad get back into housing. He's 22 with 2 kids and was completely left on his own. Had no job, no place to sleep, nothing. He was living in his car with his kids. And as it's getting colder, that is a very scary thought. So I'm very humbled and grateful that I'm in the position where I'm able to help individuals like him and his kids, and hopefully get him to be one of the success stories where next year when I'm here, I can say he was a success story and we actually moved him into permanent housing. So the proclamation is a big deal for us, and I really thank you guys for taking the time to consider it.
Thank you, Allison. Questions or comments for Allison? Now, as I understand, Morganton City passed this resolution last night, the same one, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. So that's it. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 6 from Western Piedmont Community College is presentation of the financial data for the period ending September the 30th, 2019, presented by Sandy Holman, Chief Financial Officer. Hey,
Thank
Sandy.
you. Good afternoon. It's good to be here today. Wanted to first give you a recap for fiscal year 2019, just a real quick summary. We spent $14,795,566 out of our total state budget, which was 99.55%. The areas where there was some funding left over were mainly in categorical funds, such as our Perkins Grant and the CTP project, child care, career coach, and then also basic skills. Basic skills is the one program where you can have some carry forward to the next year, which we are going to have. For our county funding, we spent 95% of the funding with a carry amount of $126,483, which we have committed to ongoing projects in our Patton and E building as well as the K building itself. We also had several vacancies during the year in maintenance, and we've attempted to conserve some funds for the upcoming year. So we did only spend 95% of our county budget for fiscal year 2019. Going into fiscal year 2020, just an update of where we are for the first quarter of the year. And as has already been mentioned, we don't have a state budget. However, what we do have in those first 3 columns is a baseline budget that our system office has given to us based on the recurring funds from last year that we know will be recurring for fiscal year 20. So we currently have a budget of $13,729,630 with additional allocations that have come in so far of $206,751, giving us a total budget as of September 30th of $13,936,381. Through the first quarter, we have spent 23% of that budget. It does not include the encumbered items, only actual expenditures that have been paid as we are on the cash basis system. The next 3 columns is our county budget and actual expenditures through September 30th. Our current budget is $2,613,155, of which we have spent 26.2% of that through the first quarter for our county budget. And then institutional, we have budgeted $5,416,497 and spent 42.7% of that budget. Again, through the end of the first quarter, realizing that most of our institutional funds come from our bookstore and also financial aid, and so that's when we have the majority of our first financial aid run for the fall semester is in September. So that's why you'll have such a large percentage in that first quarter. Going to the second page, you'll see where the different categories in our county funding. And you can see where most of the funds are spent. The largest categories as normal are our utilities and salaries and benefits, and then also insurance for the first quarter, since that is when we purchase most of our premiums on a yearly basis, and so that percentage will go down throughout the years as more expenditures are made. But utilities and salaries and benefits are always those top 2 categories where our county funding is spent. I'll be happy to answer any questions on either of those slides.
All right, gentlemen, you heard Sandy's presentation. Questions and or comments?
Mr. Chairman, we asked the same question I asked Mr. Lawrence would apply to Western North Carolina. Y'all doing okay without the budget being approved? Or?
We're doing okay at this point with the recurring funds from last year, and there was a bill that just went to the governor that he did sign off on Friday that did give most of the priorities for the community college. So really the only thing that we're missing now is the funding for any raises and the funding for the retirement and the health insurance, which we do expect that to pass, hopefully soon.
Well, good. That's some good news anyhow, isn't it? Anyhow, Mr. Chairman, the same would apply if we just chose to do a resolution. We probably should include our community colleges with that.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate that.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I might make the same suggestion that we just discussed with the school system. Allow the college to make their presentation during consent. Of course, we can always move it to something else if we so desired, and that way Sandy would not have to be here as well.
Well, I would agree with that also. Any objection to that?
Well, I agree with it with one exception, and we probably ought to address that question for this week, and it's fine with me. But sometimes other people than just us may have questions, they don't get to ask questions, but may have concerns that they want to attend the meeting to hear the reports from both the school board and the community college. And this session is not recorded, is it, Brian?
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
So they would have a chance to hear it by recording. Okay. But anyhow, we need to probably look at that pretty close before we make that standard.
All right. So you're allowing me at this time to move it to the consent agenda?
Yes.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, Sandy,
Thank
you
you.
will not have to come for the regular presentation now,
I
okay?
appreciate it.
All
Have a
right,
great day.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, moving on to our scheduled public hearings. Our first one is a scheduled public hearing for the ordinance amending Chapter 6 of the Burke Code of Ordinances and public hearings, and that is going to be presented by Debbie Hawkins from our advisory board, and she is the chair of that advisory board. Debbie, if you'll come on in.
Thank you all for taking time for this. I'm here on behalf of the advisory board, and we are recommending a slight change to the ordinance. As part of the ordinance, it talks about auditing the rescues, and currently, the way the non-compliance statement reads is if a rescue is not in compliance, excuse me, with the audit, in 2 consecutive audits, then they are no longer allowed to pull from animal services for a period of 12 months. After some discussion, the Animal Advisory Board felt that was a little extreme. What we would like to propose is that if they are not in compliance for 2 consecutive audits, excuse me, allergies, 2 consecutive audits, a warning would be given, and the rescue would have 10 days to submit additional information. If they are still out of compliance, we would revoke their privilege to pull for no less than 6 months. That gives us a little bit of flexibility to discuss extenuating circumstances, and we felt like Animal Services depends on the rescues to pull. If we were to lighten the non-compliance penalty, it might help both sides.
All right, gentlemen, you've heard Debbie's report on the ordinance suggested change. Questions or comments?
Debbie, quick question. I don't have a problem with that at all. But is this similar to maybe what other surrounding ordinances are, other counties, or, is this similar? Were we too penal to start with, comparatively speaking, when you look at other?
From my understanding, a lot of the counties in North Carolina do not audit the rescues. However, when we had a meeting with Dr. Norris from the Department of Ag, she felt that this was best practice. There are several counties outside of the state of North Carolina who do perform audits on the rescues. So that's why we have left this part in. We just felt like the penalty part of this was a little stiff.
Thank you.
And I see your board voted 6-0 to approve this change.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Was there any questions from the other folks?
No.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question for Debbie. The phrase "no less than 6 months," does that mean that in certain circumstances you would want the ability to suspend the first time for somewhere between 6 months and 12 months?
Correct.
Okay.
It depends on the circumstances. I don't know how familiar you are with the audit form, but the things that we look at are, has the animal been spayed or neutered? Has the animal had its rabies vaccinations? And where is the animal located? As far as, is it in boarding? Is it in a foster home? Where? Pretty basic.
And Debbie, that audit, is that conducted by some group of the Animal Advisory Board itself? Is that the way this
Yes,
works?
that is correct. We pick a percentage of the animals that have been pulled. It's a random audit, and then they submit the records. And then we look at the records and fill out the compliance form.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Sounds sensible to me.
Me too, sir. I'm glad to see the advisory board is doing exactly what we asked them to do. I appreciate that. You continue your work with the county manager. That will be absolutely fantastic. All right, if there's no other questions or comments, and without objection, this item will remain on for our scheduled public hearings. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 2 from Community Development will be zoning map amendment ZMA 2019-08 in public hearing. That will be presented by Scott Carpenter, Deputy County Manager and Planning Director. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners. Nice to see you this afternoon. Pardon me. This item is ZMA 2019-08, which is a request from Lake James Camping Resort LLC. And they purchased Lake James Family Campground from our old friend Chris Daly. So part of what happened when the transition took place also is that 11 acres that are in the middle of what they purchased here, the 42 acres, is actually an active septic system from across the road. So if you recall back several years ago, code enforcement had several issues with the environmental compliance of the campground, and Chris Daly put in a new septic system, a very large system actually, and new water and new electric systems and those types of things. So this group has purchased that camping area and resort from Chris Daly. And so across the street is another parcel of land. And we've been talking for several years, if you recall, that one of the things missing in Burke County at Lake James is a traditional type of camping experience where people come and they spend one night or 2 nights, up to a week, and then leave. Everything is year-round as far as the opportunities at Lake James. So this rezoning request was spurred on through, oh gosh, years of discussions and looking at the needs for that type of addition to the lake. So the surrounding land uses over in that area are mostly vacant. Right behind this property is a large nursery. On the other side of the road is the traditional campground and the marina. All of the land uses in that area are either residential. There's a few commercial things for boat landings, a store, and a few things like that. So it's out at the lake, but it's in a very rural setting. The access is off of Benfield Landing Road, and it would be through Daly Way. And that's a road that Chris Daly named that goes into here. The Fauna Flora Trail also will traverse across this whole parcel. And as a matter of fact, over the last 2 weeks, the surveyors have completed surveying those easements. These are substantial easements that runs across 3 different properties that will allow us to connect across Benfield Landing Road and make our way to North Powerhouse Road very shortly. So those are important easements. We had our public meeting with the planning board, and a few residents came out. Nobody was directly against the rezoning. A couple of people shared a couple of concerns about traffic. There was not a lot of concerns about visual problems with this because it's on the other side of the hill, so you can't see it from any of the residences or from Benfield Landing Road either. The planning board met and they voted 5-0 unanimously to recommend to this board that you approve this rezoning. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, gentlemen, you've heard Scott's presentations. Any questions and/or comments regarding this rezoning request?
Scott, so is the anticipation then that this area would be developed to provide temporary lots like for motorhomes and those kinds of uses on a temporary basis?
Yes, sir. It'll be a traditional campground, like KOA type of thing. The plans are to have a pool, a recreation area with the trail coming by it so that the campers can access and enjoy our other lake amenities. And as you know, as we've worked on the Final Florida Trail, we're trying to tie in everything together into a loop around the lake.
So his existing septic system would accommodate what the plans are for this?
Yes, sir, we believe so. So part of the approval process, when we get to that, will be a conditional approval process, and they'll have to show that that capacity is there, and as well as the water and other buffers and things are in place.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question. You gave the length of the right-of-way that he was donating, 45 feet, but we didn't have the length. How long is it from the road down to the?
Across this individual property?
Yes.
Shane, do you remember what that is? Sorry. That would be around 3,500 feet?
Yeah, that's all three.
Oh, that's all three. So all three of them is 3/4 of a mile. Through this one would be a little more than 1/3 of a mile through this campground section.
Well, that's a nice donation. Tell him we appreciate it.
I will.
Other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a nice afternoon.
Yes, sir, you too.
Thank you.
Moving on to our consent agenda, our first item on the consent is from our Animal Advisory Board again. That would be Debbie Hawkins, and she will present this regarding a change of rules of procedure.
Hello again. The Animal Advisory Board met and unanimously agreed to present to you for consideration a combination of our rules of procedure and bylaws. So the document that we developed is basically taking the old rules of procedures and merging it with the bylaws document, as well as adding a few items to the bylaws. One of those was adding to the duties of the secretary. But for the most part, the two documents, it's just a merging of the two documents.
All right, thank you, Debbie. You've heard the presentation, gentlemen. Questions and/or comments to Debbie?
Mr. Chairman, question maybe more toward the attorney. JR, have you reviewed these, and is that combination of those two items appropriate for this board?
I'm in the process of reviewing that right now. Mr. Britton. It would be appropriate because most bylaws do cover how meetings are to be run, so I'm just checking it out to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'll add too that these bylaws were fashioned after the bylaws of the county commissioners.
So the purpose of this actually is to make your board run a little bit smoother without having to work off of two documents at one time, just basically have the one document from it.
Correct.
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the consent item agenda. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 2, Madam Clerk will be with the appointments to the Adult Care and Nursing Home CAC. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
This is a request to appoint Kathy Foster to the Adult Care Nursing Home Community Advisory Committee for the remainder of a one-year term ending May 31st, 2020. It's also a request to reappoint several members whose terms ended in May, and that would be Deborah Cooper, Ron Cooper, Victoria Whitworth, and Susan Merrill. Their terms would be for 3 years ending May 31st, 2020. It is also a request to remove Helen Wilson from the roster. Her mother was placed in a nursing home, so that makes her ineligible to.
Helen's mother passed away
Oh, did she?
recently, yes.
Oh, well, the ombudsman had not let me know that. I'm sorry to hear that.
Okay.
So she might want to stay on. I will circle back around, but, and let you know how that comes out. We're also eagerly awaiting the reappointment applications for Ron, Victoria, Susan, and Deborah. We do have 2 more applications in the works, and once the regional ombudsman completes the training and orientation of these 2 other individuals, we'll bring those forward and should have a pretty good complete roster soon.
All right, questions or comments for Kay on this appointment to the board? I'm sorry I interrupted you on that, but I just remembered that Helen's mother had passed away just.
No, thank you for letting me know.
Okay. All right, hearing no objection, this item will remain on the consent item agenda. All right, moving on to item number 3 is recommendation to make appointment to the Hickory Regional Planning Commission. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. At long last, we have received an application for the Hickory Regional Planning Commission, and this is for the ETJ area. It's a very small area, and I believe that your chairman and Miss Jenny Cook went door to door soliciting folks to fill this vacancy, and the commissioners make a recommendation, and the Hickory City Council actually makes the appointment, but we're very happy to be able to check this box.
Any questions or comments for Kay? Your chairman would like to say that ETJ in Hickory, Mr. County Manager, you give Scott Black a big gold star because he narrowed that thing down to me. There's only 96 people living at ETJ. So we had to go through there and find some, and we found Mr. Weaver, and I am totally impressed with him, and I think Hickory will be tickled to death to get him. So we thank for the hard work of it. Please sure tell Scott that, Brian, please. All right, moving on. Okay, without objection, that item will remain on the consent item agenda. Moving on, item number 4 is community development, accept the Water's Edge easement amendment, and that will be presented by Shane Prisby, our community development operations manager. Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Burke County Community Development Department has been working with BWE Land LLC on a 4.749 acre easement for a public parking area and trailhead for the Fauna Flora State Trail. This parking area would be on NC 126 across from Gwaltney Road and provide connection into the Fauna Flora Trail system at the Water's Edge subdivision. This would be an amendment of our existing agreement with BWE Land LLC for the trail section we already have, and this would allow us to add a connection by trail between the existing system and the parking area, and we are very excited about this.
All right, gentlemen, you heard Shane's presentation. Any questions and or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I had a couple on that item, and I think the first one was on that, off of that 126. That's an excellent place to access the lake, to say the least. But the information didn't give where the acre for parking. Is that acre parking going to be up at 126, or is it going to be more down at the lakeside or the trail?
It will be right off the road, Mr. Commissioner. It is The land slopes down pretty aggressively down towards the trail. There's an existing logging road there. So if you come off of Gwaltney Road and you're looking straight at it, you can see that there's kind of an already open area right there. So we would be developing that for a trailhead and working within NCDOT guidelines to apply for the driveway permit and access through that.
So it's a trail access only, you can't access the lake necessarily, you can't put a boat in the lake, in other words.
Correct.
Is that correct?
It's for hike and bike access only, foot access only.
But boy, it's a nice place, that's excellent.
And it really fills a big need for having a major trailhead on that section of the trail and helping spread out use. So we're really excited about this one.
Good.
All right, Jim. Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? Mr. County Manager?
Shane, what is the actual size of the easement again? Is it 4 or 5?
5.749 acres.
Other questions or comments? All right, hearing none without objection, this item will remain on the consent item agenda. Moving on to item number 5 will be Shane again for accepting the Linville River easement.
Burke County Community Development Department has received a trail and parking area easement from Mr. James R. Crooks, owner of the Linville River Campground for the Fauna Flora State Trail. These easements have already been recorded with the Register of Deeds. We received these easements earlier and realized that they hadn't been formally accepted by the board, so we wanted to address that immediately after we identified it and present these to you so that they can be formally accepted in the record, and we can, and again, formally thank Mr. Crooks for his generous donation to this project, which were vital connection points for the trail system.
Shane, does this give you all the easements you need for the entire loop trail?
Almost. This will connect everything from Harris Wisnet, where the trail currently ends, all the way up through to the state park section, and then through the state park. Once they finish their Cove Bridge, then we have the easements to the parcel that Scott Carpenter just had up on the screen. And when we have those easements, that will tie everything to the dam system, which are already slated to be handed to us by Duke Energy as part of the CRA. So really, the last piece of the puzzle is just what we're working on in the Powerhouse Cobb area, but working mostly within the DOT right-of-way for that section as well. So this is about it. This is we've got about everything we need to tie everything together. So we're really happy to be where we're at right now.
This is quite an accomplishment, and the board having the wisdom and the vision to see this and support their community development, and the way they have managed grants and gotten matches from one thing to another to build this infrastructure to help us in tourism and quality of life is phenomenal.
And I'm really excited that, we can provide such a vital connection through an area that has already had so much development. And in the timeline we've been able to accomplish that is, we're really happy with that and really excited about it.
Any other questions or comments?
Shane, if I understand the easement correctly, it's a trail and also a parking area, is that correct? Or?
That is correct. Yeah, it's down the existing drive from the campground, and then the parking area is off to the side. So we'll direct users through there, make sure that they're driving slow and being respectful of the easement and that it is on private property. And that's a big priority for us to let people know that this is a very big donation from somebody at no, for nothing back to them other than giving this access publicly and permanently, which is huge and incredibly generous. So we want to make sure that that's respected.
So the trail is actually on that driveway that exists already, and then the parking area just kind of off to the side of it.
That is correct. It's off a wood road, and it parallels state park property and the campground property. and then ties into the existing state park line.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none without objection, this item will remain on the consent item agenda. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on to item number 6, we from the county manager, a resolution establishing new office space for the magistrates. Mr. County Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We are truly getting into short rows with the jail project. And of course, within the jail is office space that was designed specifically for and intended for use by the magistrates in the fulfillment of their duties and interaction with law enforcement officers as well as the public. It's more procedural than anything else. I'm not aware of an actual requirement, but I would like the board to consider adoption of the resolution. And as things become clearer about potential dates for the transfer of different parts of the operation from the downtown jail, the magistrates, and then the transfer of the in-custody defendants from Burke Catawba to the new jail, I will update the board as to particular dates, and I will also keep in touch with the Chief District Court Judge who the magistrates report to inform him of the dates that we would like to make that transition.
Questions or comments for the county manager?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple. The first one is, I guess this is about $800,000 in round dollars and cents. And was that already budgeted in the jail's budget?
Yeah, that's what it is. They took the breakdown of square footage that is going to be attributed to the use by the magistrates and divided the total project cost by that to get the cost. So that's based on square footage. And it is part of the budget, yes, sir.
But it is part of the budget, it's not coming out of the general fund on that. Okay, I think that's the only question I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none without objection, this item will remain on the consent item agenda. Thank you, Brian. Moving on in finance will be application for public school building capital lottery funds, and that will be presented by Ms. Margaret Pierce, Deputy County Manager and Finance Officer. Ma'am.
Commissioners, this is an application to draw down part of the lottery funds available to go toward debt service. We do this approximately every other year. It's been approved by the school board already and requires our board's approval as well to submit to the state in order to draw those funds down.
All right, gentlemen, you've heard Margaret's presentation. Questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one. I prefer to ask it privately, but I guess the way the business runs, I can't do that. But I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask was, given that $2 million and authorizing them to put on those two schools, what does that leave budgeted? How much do we still owe for those two high schools? Do we know?
I can look that number up. It's 2026, I believe it pays out. 2023, I'll have to look real quick.
So if we pay that two off, we're down to around 224. Is that correct? Well,
I meant the year. I apologize. The year 2023.
Did you say projected year payoff is 2024?
26.
2026, that's what I thought.
2026. You're asking, it's already included in that service, so it's not going to pay anything early. Is that what you're asking me?
do what now?
Whether it pays anything early or not?
No, the balance that we owe after paying 2,000 that the lottery fund is paying.
She may have to get back with you on that. I don't know that you can quickly pull that up, but go ahead.
Yeah, each loan has just over $10 million still owed on it, and that's, the schools are a portion of it, so I'll have to get you the exact number. What this does is it's already part of the scheduled debt service payment, so it doesn't change our payouts or anything. But I'll be happy to get you a number of what's owed on those schools.
And all the lottery pull-down money goes to debt service on the two schools?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
On that, Mr. Chairman, excuse me, on our agreement with that lottery fund, am I understanding they received $4 million and they're spending their two, or they're spending the county's two too?
Lottery funds are required to run through the county. The school system doesn't have access alone to them. $2 million will be taken from approximately $2.2 million that's sitting in our account with the state for lottery funds. It's about $860,000 that's received each year. So the habit has been, the practice has been with Burke to allow those to build up to a slightly more significant number and then do a drawdown of a portion of the payment every other year.
Let me ask the county manager, I'm still concerned, I'm trying to protect our interests, gentlemen, that we, that agreement that we did in court. But anyhow, just how we are arriving at our part of that deal is really the question, and it probably will take some time. But I'd just like to know that they're living up to their obligations, just like we live up to ours. That's the short and simple of it.
Yes, sir. This is, in that agreement, it states that we can come up with a number to draw down. Lottery funds will be utilized for school capital, and that is what this is. So it is being used as per that agreement, and this is in line with
So
that.
there's an addition to that,
There's no county dollars in this. It's only the state lottery funds.
no, there's supposed to be some funds coming to the county out of that fund.
These are. This $2 million is coming to the county.
Is that having to do with when we hit a certain threshold with sales tax? Are you talking about that? That we'd be able to do some things? We'd have to go back and look at that wording on that, but I'm not sure that's maybe what you're trying to get at.
Okay. One of us will have a little conversation and just so you fully understand. It'd be best to talk to Brian, I'm sure, of how that came down, or maybe the attorney. I don't even think you were here at that point, were you? Okay. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? All right, without objection, this item will remain on the consent item agenda. Moving on to item number 8 and item number 9, that will be from Danny Eisenhower, our tax collector. This will be the tax collection report for October 2019, along with the tax refund report. Danny?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you. Tax collection, property tax, we're at 68.69% collected. Motor vehicle at 35.87%. When you put those two together, we have a 65.55% collection. And that's about a quarter of 1% higher than the same time last year. Delinquent taxes, we're at 51.65%, so we're up about $63,000 there. Late list penalty, we're at 48.92%, so we're up about $24,000 from prior year there. When you look at the tax levy, which is more along our line, we're at 66.63%. And I remind you that the difference between the levy and the budget is the amount of taxes that we're actually levying on versus what's budgeted to collect.
All right, questions on the tax collection report? All right, Danny, move forward.
Release refund report, we had releases in the amount of $9,719.55. We had $5,769.54 rebuild, which gives us a net release of $3,950.01. We had refunds in the amount of $1,240.67, and our vehicle tax refunds over $100 were $186.92.
Questions on the release refund report? All right, hearing none, without objection, these two reports will remain on the consent item agenda. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, move forward to items for decision. The first item will be from the sheriff of Burke County, a request for proposals for inmate food services. And you did make it from Asheville. Will that be presented
I
by
got a
Sheriff
story to
Steve
tell you.
Wisnett?
And Brian Neath, our budget and finance person, is accompanying me. I would have made it by 3 o'clock, and appreciate the county manager filling in for presentations, but I ran across a young lady with asthma. She had collapsed. They were pushing a car across the road, so we on Jamestown Road, and we got her medical attention. And then I met a car driving the wrong way on Green Street, so got her turned around. So I didn't make it right at 3 o'clock, so apologize. The first one, inmate food services for the new jail, and consultation with the Burke County Finance Office, we made a request for proposals. County website on September the 6th of this year, along with running an ad in the newspaper. We had a pre-proposal conference held on September 18th, with the proposals due on October 4th. We received 4 proposals and ended up with consultation again with Finance Department, choosing the less expensive quote to go with the jail at $1.92 per meal.
All right, gentlemen, you heard the sheriff on his proposal. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I have several. They're listing the cost as 1.925. That's less than $2 of the budget. And the questions that I have is, what do we lose by doing this? How many employees do we lose if we're not going to prepare the food indoors?
How many employees do we lose by not preparing the food? Well, we wouldn't lose any if we don't prepare the food. We would have to have more employees if we prepared the food ourselves. Is that what you're asking?
No. Are you currently using a service?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I don't know jails that don't
So
use
we're not
food
adding or
service.
taking away any employees?
No, it's
to
the
do
way it's
this?
been done for years and years. I don't really know of any facility our size that prepare the food themselves. Everybody contracts with a food service company.
Okay. They had an entire list of needed tables, equipment, let's call it equipment, serving equipment, I guess you would go. And that would be ours, that does not belong to them, is that
Correct.
And
That's,
it's already ordered and probably in place?
It's
for the
installed
new-
and looks very good. We've had some very good comments about the new jail kitchen. I think people are excited about all the equipment and the ability to prepare the food there.
Okay. All right. Mr. Chairman, I believe that's all I need to know on that subject.
All right, Sheriff, just for clarification purposes, there will be none of the detainees or inmates in the jail will be cooking in the kitchen. This will all be through this company, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, without objection, this will remain on the items for decision. Moving on to item number 2 is request for proposals for the inmate medical services.
Okay, we did a similar situation with consultation with Finance Department and asked for requests for proposals. They were published on the county website on August 28th, along with running an ad in the local newspaper. We had a pre-proposal conference on September the 4th, with proposals due to September 25th, 2019. The Sheriff's Office, in consultation with the Finance Department, chose International Medical Services because they were the lowest responsive bidder. They also have a medical doctor on staff. They have years of experience working in jails with inmates, and in our determination, IMS is judged best able to provide the healthcare delivery system at the Burke County Jail that best fits the needs of our county. They were next to the lowest bidder of the 5 bids we received. The lowest bidder did not meet the qualifications as far as what we had asked for them. And included no staffing plan. The staffing plan was incomplete. It omitted the staff on Saturdays and Sundays. Also, the proposal did not list medical care for 16 hours on Saturdays and Sundays, so we did not consider them and went with the lowest bidder that had presented all the information.
All right, gentlemen, you heard the sheriff's proposal. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, no comments really, other than given the information in both these items, I wonder if we couldn't move both of these to consent, items 1 and 2, since everything's pretty clear cut with both these items.
Gentlemen, any objections to moving this to consent? I don't have an objection.
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know what, I meant to call an attorney, and I didn't, on that question. Usually if it deals with real estate, money over a certain amount, major change, you don't put it on the consent agenda. And I feel like this is a huge dollar amount that we're looking at to do this. And one of the questions I wanted to ask is how does this compare? I guess the question is why are we having this question if it's something new, and the budget and where it's coming from, and the medical care, and I mean, you know, for one time, looking at that program, Steve, the medical, the lower bidders, it was almost reasonable for health care, and so, but are we spending that money now on Medicare to somebody?
Yes, we've got a contract with medical care too, as well as food.
And what difference is it from this year, from last year to this year?
I'd have to have some help from Margaret on that.
Well, you're combining all of those people at Burke Catawba into the county jail, so you're merging the downtown jail and Burke Catawba together, so they're two different little things there, but yeah, we've been doing this, and also I believe some of what the sheriff is trying to get at is to minimize the number of times an inmate would have to be taken out of the county jail and taken to the hospital, where your costs go up exponentially. And again, this is all budgeted in the budget for the remainder of this year, and I mean, it'd be hard to go back and see what Burke Catawba. And then again, fellas, I mean, you just never know what kind of people you're going to have come into jail and what kind of health conditions they have, and if they're in the jail, you're going to have to take care of it one way or another. So it's kind of hard to give you a real definitive comparison.
And sir, I can give you one broad statement that the inmates coming into the jail are sicker. They're getting sicker and sicker. We're paying more and more. I don't foresee that changing. Having better health care with medical staff in the jail will be, I think, in the long run, much less expensive than calling EMS every time one of them gets sick and take them to the emergency department, where you then, they have examinations, and if they find serious issues, we end up paying for all those. Plus, a deputy sits on them. We take a deputy off the street, and they have to sit with them 24/7. A lot of them end up in trauma centers such as CMC, Maine, and Charlotte, and deputies have to drive down there and sit 24/7. We've sat there for weeks in the past. So hopefully with this medical care that we've got, we can handle most of those medical situations inside the facility itself, and in the long run save the taxpayer a lot of dollars.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, like I said, what brought this question, and I am assuming, did not have time to go check it before we came up here, but I'm assuming we usually handle that budget item through our budget. And it was different, and then it said that X dollars would be paid from funds of year 1920, and the other half would be paid out of the next budget. And I'm assuming that's because you can only get a contract for a year, is that correct? Not less than a year?
Well, I'm assuming that that's because we're starting in the middle of the year, so we don't have to pay but for half a year
Yeah.
initially, first year.
And the total is $318,000.
Does that sound right? I didn't add it up.
And Mr. County Manager, that's in line with the budget as a rule of thumb for the last several years on that item?
Well, again, depends on who comes into the jail and how sick they are and what status. You've had somebody they've taken into custody, wound up having his leg all blowed up, and they took him down to Charlotte and said that, he wouldn't be. You just never know, but it's.
I think that bill we got for one inmate was close to $250,000, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that one inmate alone.
So one inmate can take your entire budget.
We're getting ready to talk to you about a little amendment here in just a bit.
Talk what?
Getting ready to talk to you about a budget amendment to the jail medical in just a minute, so.
Okay. All right. Let's see, just a second, make sure that I did not have another one. I believe that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we're back to the question of moving this to the consent item agenda. Are you objecting to that, Commissioner Taylor?
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
It needs to be on a decision.
All right, these two items, Madam Clerk, will remain on for items for decision because we do have an objection. All right, moving on to number 3 on decision items will be from the clerk, appointment to the Animal Advisory Board. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Seat number 7 represents an at-large pet owner on the Animal Advisory Board, was formerly held by Mr. David Coffin and is vacant due to his resignation. We have received applications and rabies certificates from Megan Bradley, Linda Garibaldi, Donald Probst, and Carla Wallace. The term ends July 31st, 2020. So if we receive additional applications, we'll certainly add them to the agenda packet. But you have 4 excellent choices to choose from for seat number 7.
Questions for Kay on this matter? All right, hearing none without objection, this item will remain on items for decision. Moving on to our next item, be number 4. This will be acceptance or rejection of offer to purchase a surplus property, presented by J.R. Simpson, County Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. A Burke County citizen and resident has approached the county to purchase a piece of property that the county owns. It's a 600th of an acre in size parcel located on East View Street. We have a procedure that the board adopted in 2010 for dealing with offers of this sort in order to comply both with the statute as well as with our own procedures. And what happens is that someone can make an offer. The board can either accept that offer, or they can come back with a minimum that the board would accept. This property is valued on the tax records at $2,700, and the gentleman making the offer has offered $500 for the property. At your meeting, you can either accept that or come up with a price that you would accept. And if you accept his price, then we would publish a legal ad that would give the public notice and 10 days to upset his proposal. If someone did upset it, then we would post another legal ad in the paper, setting a new 10-day period, and so forth until there is a final bid without upset. So this is on to, for the commissioners to make a decision as to what this property is worth. I believe Mr. Eisenhower has commented that it ought to include at least $500 for attorney's fees spent at the time and $125 for advertising of the property in the News Herald. And that would have been back, I believe, in 1982. So the board is left with that. In 2010, as part of adopting this new ordinance, the board did look at its property and put values on them. And this particular piece of property was valued in 2010 with a value of $2,002.55.
All right, gentlemen, you've heard JR's presentation. Any questions or comments?
JR, it does say in the notes here, the tax office's value at $2,700 is not representative of fair market value, which should be between $500 and $1,000. Is that true?
I have no way of knowing what the fair market value of that property is without an appraisal. But the tax administrator does seem to think that the property is overvalued at $2,700.
I mean, for $2,700, I wish I owned it, because, you know, if that's what they're gonna give, you know, that was valued at .06 acres, seems reasonable to get what we can get out of it at this point.
I would think so, and it's a piece of property that's of no value except to perhaps
because it's
two
unbuilt.
different adjoining owners.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, on Scott's statement, that it does state in here the tax office value of $2,700 is not representative of a fair market value. And I'm a little embarrassed about this on the behalf of the county. If I understand this correct, we've already spent $500 on attorney's fees. Was that at 202 or now? And we spent $125 for advertising?
As far as I know, that was back in 1982.
Okay, so why would the tax office list it at $2,700 when they're now saying that fair value is $500? Now, most taxpayers are going to question, well, is mine listed that much more? Well, if it's not a fair listing, we should have corrected it before we advertised it for sale. I think that how much more cost, let me ask this, how much more cost will we have by the time we get it sold? We'll have your fee, correct? On top of the 5 and the 125?
Well, you'll have my hourly rate, yes, sir, and you will have the cost of advertising.
That's the
the
second
proposal.
time. Yeah. Well, it's a catch-22, Mr. Chairman. I hate to charge anybody for a piece of property as a county that's more than it's worth, but at the same token, I hate for the taxpayers to pay the cost of this procedure, and they absolutely get nothing out of the entire deal. I was going to suggest, JR, I would lean heavy on your expertise on that he stated in his offering that he was making a first offering of bid for $500. I would suggest that we at least try to recoup expenses of year and this year, and counter offer at $1,000 or $750 and see what we can come up with. We don't have to sell it today, and we can revisit it by letting our attorney make a counter offer.
We have I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
Mr. Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, but well, we could dicker all we wanted to, but in the end, we've still got to go through the process. It'd have to be an upset bid process. We're still gonna have to advertise it, so we're just gonna keep mounting up more fee. We're not careful here.
That's right.
Any other questions or comments? We do have a suggested motion to entertain on next Tuesday night or Tuesday week to accept the amount of $500, but it also gives us the authority to establish a new minimum bid of whatever that might be. So if either of you if you're not comfortable with the suggested motion of $500, you can establish a new bid. But if you want to establish a new bid, I'd like to hear about what you think that new bid should be before we meet in our regular meeting on, what date is that, Kay? Tuesday, 2 weeks, okay, whatever that date is. So if you have another amount in mind, because right now it is at an offer of $500 from the bidder or the person that wants to purchase the property. So if you have anything else, please let me know if you want to establish something a little bit different.
Mr. Chairman, can I follow up on that?
Yes, sir.
We can always take 500.
Yes, sir.
You know you're gonna get 500.
Absolutely.
What's it gonna cost you to say, you know, to counter offer at a higher price? It's gonna cost you a penny. So, you know, I think personally, if it's on the street, a major street, this and that and the other, that it's worth a little more than 5, I would agree. I don't think it's worth 27, so.
If you want to establish a new minimum bid, which it says you can here, just please let me know. How many years have we not been collecting any property taxes off of it? Since 19 what?
82.
Since 1982, we've not collected a penny off of it. Okay. That's how long we've been sitting there holding it. All right.
And just one more comment, Mr. Chairman, this is not a usable piece of property for anything I can see. I mean, I don't even know if you could put a wood shed on it, you know, at that acreage. So at this point, it's going to remain an empty piece of property. And if you have somebody willing to buy it, say, you know, let's at least get it on the tax books. And we don't have to take care of it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. Hearing none without objection, this item will remain on the items for decision. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on, item number 5 from the county manager is funding for the inmate medical care, presented by Brian Steen, county manager. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We still have people at Burke Catawba. We have taken steps to start direct billing the county from which the defendant is from, whose custody he belongs in, but we are about to deplete the funds that are available currently at Burke Catawba for in custody defendants' medical care. And again, you just never know what somebody comes in there with, and you have to take care of their medical bills. So we're needing the appropriation of some additional monies to carry us on out through the conclusion of Burke Catawba, if there's anything left over, or if this just is an amount up to, so that we can pay bills, that would be greatly appreciated.
Questions or comments for Brian?
Mr. Chairman, as sad as it is, there's not a whole lot of control we can do over this, the way the system is set up, but it would be nice to have a cushion some way other than the general fund to always bleed from, if you get my drift. But I understand the procedure, and it's almost due process, so just my comment on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Actually, we are working on that. There is insurance you can buy for catastrophic issues with inmates, and Brian Neef has completed the application, and we're waiting to hear back. What it would mean is we would come back to you with a proposal where we would pay an insurance premium and have a deductible $10,000. What we're looking at is a $10,000 deductible for these situations, where going forward, we might have a $40,000, $50,000 premium each year, have a $10,000 deductible, but it would save us a $250,000 claim. So it's cost effective if we can get approved for it. But we have some significant claims in that history we had to send them. So we're waiting to see what kind of premium, whether it would be cost effective or not. But again, those claims are so random and unfortunate that we are just obligated to pay them, but we are looking at a solution to maybe not have this happen.
I anxiously wait to see that and hope it's as good as you're indicating, but I was trying to be creative there, and I'd really like to do what some of the state does and federal government does, that, we're good up to X amount of dollars. For example, 50,000 from that, Uncle Sam, or state. And I think it would take a major effort and collaboration with all the county commissioners and probably several states to get that passed. But it is funny, and I'll say this, and I don't mean it negative, but I'll just say that when somebody can come into an area, a man and woman, and cost you $70,000 the first year for being here, and we can't even get that because of somebody in the hospital of our own, and it's one of those unfair things going on in the world. I don't know what it'll take to fix it, but it certainly needs to be corrected. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other comments? All right, without objection, this item will remain on the items for decision. Moving on to our reports, our first one will be County Financial Report for the period ending September the 30th, 2019. Ms. Margaret.
I think you all received it by email just after the packet went out. I apologize, I was late in getting that 2K. But you have it. Overall, our revenues, property tax, as Danny mentioned, is just up just a tiny amount from last year at the same time. Sales tax doesn't happen until starting in October, so that number being 0 is common. The rest of our revenues are in line, some a little bit above what's expected, but we are on target for all of those. On the expenditure side, everything is in place. We are on target for everything. We are just under the same point last year in expenditures. Some of that simply due to how annualized payments hit. Are there any questions in particular on the general fund?
Questions, gentlemen?
Financial page?
I'm sorry, I didn't see that, so I don't think.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, without objection, this item will remain on the agenda now as a consent item agenda. Okay. Gentlemen, I want to remind you of a few things that are happening. Remember, today is Election Day. The polls will be open until 7:30 p.m. today, so if you've not voted, please do so. November the 11th will be Veterans Day. Our county offices will be closed. There will be a Veterans Day celebration down at Foothills Higher Education Center starting at 10:30 with a little reception before the activities actually start at 11. November the 15th will be our Valdez Library grand reopening ceremony at 10:30 a.m. Kay says that will be rain or shine. I hope she ordered shine. Okay? It's not looking good, we understand. November the 19th is a meet and greet for our new DSS director, Mr. Corey Fisher-Wellman, who came to us from Catawba County, and that will be at the Human Resources Center in the conference room on Parker Road from 10 to 11 o'clock a.m. So if at all possible, please make arrangements to come meet Corey. November 28th and 29th, the county offices will be closed for the Thanksgiving holidays. December the 2nd, please be reminded our pre-agenda moves from Tuesday till Monday. December the 2nd, Monday, will be our pre-agenda as the Milky Christmas Parade will occur on that Tuesday, December the 3rd. Tentatively, and I think everything's pretty much set for our grand opening of the Burke County Jail on December the 12th, which will be on a Thursday at a time. 10:30 a.m. All right. Is there anything else that needs to be brought before the board? Any news items or anything?
Mr. Chairman, may I do a remembrance on behalf of an ex-county commissioner, Lord Young. He lost his lovely daughter. The funeral was Sunday, at Oak Ridge, Wilkes Grove, and he was a commissioner the first time that I was elected as commissioner, and I served with him 2 years. He is in a rest home, but he was able to come to the funeral, so. She is married to a guy we have used at times, Don Britton is her husband. Her name was Annette Young. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Anything else come before the board? Okay, not hearing anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, we stand adjourned.